Have you ever wondered what it feels like to hold back death with your bare hands, while knowing no one may ever remember you for it? Good evening, and welcome back to Wisdom by the Fireside. In today's live story, we step into the life of a woman who carried entire wards of strangers on her shoulders when the world fell apart, only to be left behind when the lights came back on. It is a story of sacrifice, despair, and the long road back to redemption. When the levees broke in New Orleans in August 2005, the city drowned. Whole neighborhoods were swallowed, power vanished, and hospitals turned into dark tombs filled with cries, sweat, and desperation. In the middle of that chaos was Angela, a nurse who had been on shift when Hurricane Katrina roared ashore. Angela had been working 12-hour nights at Charity Hospital on Tulane Avenue. She was 32 years old, divorced, with no children. The hospital wasn't just her workplace. It was her world. She had always said God gave her a gift, a steady hand and a strong back, to carry others through their weakest hours. But nothing in her years of nursing could have prepared her for what Katrina would bring. The storm raged through the city like a living beast. Windows shattered, rain poured in sideways, and the backup generators groaned in the basement. Angela and her fellow staff tied bedsheets to doors, trying to block floodwater from seeping in. When the power finally died, the machines silenced one by one. The ventilators, the monitors, the humming lights overhead. Suddenly, every patient's survival was no longer in the hands of technology, but in the trembling, overworked hands of the nurses. Angela moved room to room with only a flashlight tucked into her scrubs. She squeezed oxygen bags with one hand and whispered prayers with the other. She gave patients ice chips from a cooler while sweat soaked through her uniform. The hallways smelled of mildew, blood, and fear. Outside, helicopters circled, but rescue seemed impossibly far away. Days blurred together. Angela barely slept. She rationed syringes, tore her own shirt to make bandages, and lifted elderly patients onto mattresses that floated when water surged through the ground floor. She never thought of herself, only of the people who could not move, could not breathe, could not survive without her. But the city was collapsing faster than help could arrive. Supplies dwindled. Families cried in the dark, begging for miracles. Angela's feet bled from standing. Her voice cracked from shouting orders. Yet she carried on. One night, as thunder cracked over the city, she found herself kneeling beside a boy, 10 years old, asthmatic, barely holding on. His name was Michael. His small hand clutched hers as she pumped air into his lungs, counting every breath. "Don't let go," he whispered between gasps. Angela whispered back, "I won't. Not until God takes me first." That moment burned into her heart. Amid screams and sorrow, she saw God's hand in keeping the boy alive, breath by breath. But what she didn't know then was how that single promise, spoken in the dark, would return decades later to pull her out of her own despair. By the time federal rescue teams arrived, Angela was gaunt, dehydrated, and nearly collapsing. She had carried patients on her shoulders, down dark stairwells, prayed over the dying, and fought death with every ounce of her strength. But when buses finally came and families reunited, no one asked her name. Reporters praised the heroes of Katrina, but Angela was not on television. She walked away with nothing but bruises, exhaustion, and memories too heavy for one soul to bear. For years after, she tried to go back to nursing, but something inside her had drowned in those waters. Nightmares haunted her. She left the hospital, then left nursing altogether. By 2020, she was living in a small apartment outside Baton Rouge, forgotten, alone, and carrying silent scars. She worked odd jobs, kept to herself, and let the world move on without her. What she could never have guessed was that the boy whose hand she once held, the child she had promised not to let go, was now a grown man. And God was about to send him back into her life, not as a patient this time, but as a savior she never expected. But how could one moment in a flooded hospital return after 15 years? And why did God wait so long? The floodwaters drained, the headlines faded, and the cameras moved on. But for Angela, the storm never ended. In the first months after Katrina, she tried to return to her old life at Charity Hospital. But the building was gutted, the wards ruined. The government closed it down for good. Angela found herself drifting from one temporary clinic to another, filling shifts where she could, but her spirit was cracked. At night, she would wake in a sweat, hearing the phantom hum of ventilators that no longer worked, smelling the mildew of flooded halls. The cries of patients haunted her ears. She would see Michael's face, the boy with asthma, gasping for air, clutching her hand. And though he had lived, she remembered dozens who hadn't. Their silence weighed heavier than any gratitude she might have received. Nursing, once her calling, became unbearable. She tried to keep going, but her hands would tremble when she touched IV lines. The sound of thunder made her freeze. Even the smell of hospital disinfectant sent her spiraling back into panic. Her supervisors noticed. Patients noticed. Eventually, Angela resigned. She thought leaving nursing would bring peace, but it only deepened the hole. Without the uniform, who was she? For years, she had been Nurse Angela, the steady hand in the storm. Now, she was just Angela, a middle-aged woman with scars no one could see. She moved to Baton Rouge, renting a modest one-bedroom apartment near Florida Boulevard. She worked at a grocery store for a while, stocking shelves in silence. Later, she picked up cleaning jobs, folding laundry at a motel. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep the lights on. She told herself she was surviving. But surviving was not the same as living. Her neighbors barely knew her. She kept her curtains drawn, her head down. In her fridge, there were always the same items: milk, bread, a few apples. She stopped going to church. She said she was too tired, but deep down, she was ashamed. Ashamed that she had once been a light in the darkness, and now she felt like a flickering bulb barely holding on. Some nights she whispered prayers, half-hearted, almost sarcastic. Lord, if you had wanted me to keep fighting, why did you let me break? Why let me save strangers only to lose myself? She never heard an answer, or maybe she was too broken to notice. Then came 2020, the year of masks, lockdowns, fear, and empty shelves. While the world battled COVID-19, Angela felt the old panic clawing back. The sound of sirens at night shook her. Reports of overwhelmed hospitals twisted her stomach. She wanted to help, but she couldn't bring herself to step foot inside a ward again. The guilt gnawed at her. Had God given her a gift she had buried in the ground? One afternoon, as she sat on her worn-out couch, she saw a news segment on TV. A young man being interviewed for leading a new nonprofit that provided medical supplies to struggling clinics during the pandemic. His name scrolled across the bottom of the screen: Michael Carter, 25, CEO of Breathe Again Foundation. Angela froze. The name hit her like lightning, and then the face. The same eyes, the same shape of jaw, though older now, stronger. She dropped her glass of water, spilling it across the carpet. Could it be? The boy with asthma. The child she once promised not to let go. She leaned closer to the TV as Michael spoke about his mission: to help every child with breathing difficulties, especially in crises, to ensure no one felt abandoned in a hospital the way he once did. His words were steady, his voice full of conviction. Angela's hands shook. Tears blurred her vision. Lord, she whispered, is that him? For the first time in years, she felt something stir, a crack of light breaking through the walls she had built around her heart. But she couldn't be sure. After all, how many Michaels were there in New Orleans? Could this really be the same boy? Her doubts clashed with her hope. Part of her wanted to believe God had just placed a miracle on her screen. Another part told her not to be foolish. What would a successful young CEO want with a broken woman who used to be a nurse? But then came the twist. 2 days later, Angela received a letter in the mail. Not a bill, not a flyer. An envelope with her name written by hand. Inside was a typed note. Dear Ms. Angela, I hope this letter reaches the right person. Years ago, during Hurricane Katrina, I was a child fighting for my life in Charity Hospital. I still remember the nurse who held my hand, who promised not to let me go. I don't know her last name. I don't know if she's alive or where she is. But if you are her, please know that I never forgot. You saved me. And now, I want to find you. Sincerely, Michael Carter." Angela's hands covered her mouth. She felt the air leave her lungs. It was him. It was really him. But what could she do with this? Answer the letter? Hide it away? Could she face the boy who had grown into a man, who had built a mission on the very life she had saved, while she herself had fallen so low? She folded the letter, pressed it to her chest, and wept. 15 years of silence had broken open in a single moment. She didn't know it yet, but God was already weaving her redemption back together, thread by thread. Angela placed the letter back in its envelope and set it on the kitchen table. She stared at it for hours, as though the paper itself might start speaking. Her hands traced the edges, folding and unfolding, but she couldn't bring herself to write back. The past 15 years had been built on silence, shame, and avoidance. To answer Michael's letter meant reopening all the wounds she had buried. It meant admitting to someone else how far she had fallen, how the woman who once carried people through storm waters now spent her days folding motel sheets and hiding from the world. That night, Angela lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above her. Her mind raced. What would he see if he found me? Would he see a hero or a failure? She remembered the promise she made to Michael in the dark hospital corridor. I won't let go, not until God takes me first. At the time, she had believed it with her whole heart, but hadn't she let go? Hadn't she let go of herself? The next morning, she tried to distract herself with routine. She brewed coffee, cleaned the small kitchen, and swept the porch. But every action felt hollow. The letter sat in the same spot, pulling her eyes back again and again. By noon, she decided she would at least walk to the mailbox. She slipped the envelope into her purse and took a long walk around the block. Her neighborhood was quiet. Modest homes with peeling paint, children riding bikes on cracked sidewalks. She felt out of place even here, invisible. At the corner, she stopped at the mailbox and held the letter out. All it needed was a reply. A simple "Yes, I am the nurse." Just a few words. But her hands trembled, her throat tightened, and then shame washed over her. She stuffed the envelope back into her purse and walked home without mailing anything. For days, the struggle continued. Every morning she woke with the thought, write him back. Every night she went to bed telling herself, tomorrow. One evening, she poured herself a glass of water and sat at the table with pen and paper. She wrote 3 words, "Yes, it's me." Then she froze. The words looked wrong, inadequate, unworthy. What would come next? Would he want to meet her? Would he expect the same strong, fearless nurse he remembered? Angela wasn't that woman anymore. Tears smudged the ink. She crumpled the page and threw it away. But God has a way of nudging us forward when we're too paralyzed to move. A week later, Angela's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in her heart told her to answer. "Hello?" Her voice cracked. "Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. This might sound strange. My name is Michael Carter. I'm trying to track down the nurse who saved me during Hurricane Katrina. Someone gave me this number, but if I'm wrong, please forgive me." Angela's breath caught. Her hand gripped the phone so tightly it hurt. Silence stretched. She could hang up, pretend it was a mistake. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "This is the moment. Don't let it pass." Finally, she spoke. "Michael, it's me." The line went quiet. Then, she heard him exhale, shaky, like a boy again. "Oh my God, it's really you." Angela closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, it's me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air was thick with memories neither could fully name. Then Michael said softly, "I've been looking for you for years. I didn't even know your last name, but I couldn't forget your voice. You promised not to let go, and you didn't. I'm alive because of you." Angela pressed the phone to her chest, overcome. She wanted to explain, to confess how broken she had become, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, she whispered, "I'm glad you made it." Michael's tone grew warmer, steadier. more than made it. I've built something because of you. The foundation I started. It's all inspired by that night. By what you did for me." Angela swallowed hard. She couldn't comprehend how the weakest moment of her life had turned into the seed of his mission. She had thought Katrina destroyed her purpose. Yet here was a man telling her that very night had given him his. "Angela," Michael said after a pause, "I don't want to pressure you, but I'd really like to meet you, to thank you in person, if you're willing." Angela's heart raced. Images of herself, older, worn down, tired, flashed in her mind. She thought of him, young, successful, full of light. Wouldn't he be disappointed? I don't know," she stammered. "Please," he said gently. "It doesn't have to be now, or tomorrow, but one day. I owe you that." Angela closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something stir. Hope, but also fear. Was this God's way of pulling her back into life? Or was it a test she was too weak to face? She whispered, "Maybe one day." Michael didn't push. "I'll wait. Just knowing you're still here is enough for me." When the call ended, Angela sat in silence, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Her world had been small, gray, and lonely. Now a door had cracked open. But stepping through it would mean facing everything she had run from, and she wasn't sure she could. Yet somewhere deep inside, a whisper echoed, "Do not be afraid. I am still with you." The call had ended, but Angela's heart had not slowed. For days, she replayed Michael's voice in her head. The warmth, the gratitude, the insistence that she was the reason he lived. It felt impossible. How could the boy who once clung to her hand now be the man building foundations, speaking on television, commanding rooms full of people? Angela looked at herself in the mirror one morning. Her hair had streaks of gray. Lines traced her face where exhaustion had carved its story. She saw the loose uniform she wore to clean motel rooms, the hollowness in her eyes. "He'll be disappointed," she whispered to the mirror. "He'll see nothing but a broken woman." And yet, deep inside, a whisper pushed back. "But he's still reaching for you." After a week of restless nights, Angela dialed the number he had called from. Her hand shook as she waited for the ring. "Hello?" Michael's voice was calm, steady. "It's me," she said softly. "Angela." His tone lifted instantly. "Angela, I didn't think you'd call back so soon." Her throat tightened. I've been thinking, if you still want to meet, maybe?" "I'd be honored," Michael said quickly but gently, as though afraid she might change her mind. "Anytime, anywhere that feels safe for you." Angela thought for a moment. She didn't want to be seen in a crowded place, judged or recognized. "There's a little diner off Airline Highway," she said, "in Rosie's. Do you know it?" "I do," Michael replied. "Name the time, and I'll be there." 2 days later, Angela walked into Rosie's, with her heart pounding so hard she thought the waitress might hear it. The diner smelled of coffee and frying bacon, the air buzzing with quiet chatter. She had chosen a corner booth where she could retreat if panic took hold. Then she saw him. Michael walked in wearing a plain button-down shirt and jeans. No cameras, no entourage, just him. His hair was neatly trimmed, his posture confident, but his eyes carried the same softness she remembered. He looked around until he spotted her, then his face broke into a smile that stopped her breath. "Angela," he said, approaching. She stood awkwardly, her hands fidgeting. "Michael!" For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The last time they had met, he had been a frail boy gasping for air, his small hand clutching hers. Now he was taller than her, broad-shouldered, alive with purpose. She felt small in comparison. But when he reached out and hugged her, it was not out of pity. It was reverence, gratitude. "I can't believe I'm really seeing you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Angela's eyes welled. "You grew up," she whispered. They sat, and the waitress poured coffee. Angela's hands trembled as she stirred in sugar. She expected awkwardness, maybe disappointment in his eyes. But Michael leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You probably don't remember everything," he began, "but I do. I was terrified. I couldn't breathe. Everyone around me was panicking, and then there was you. You held my hand. You told me not to let go. You kept me alive when everything else was falling apart." Angela swallowed hard. "Michael, I don't know what to say. I did what any nurse would have done." "No," he shook his head firmly. "Not everyone would. You didn't just save me, you gave me hope. That promise that you wouldn't let go, it stayed with me my whole life. It became the reason I wanted to help others breathe, to never feel abandoned." His words felt like light seeping into the cracks of her heart. But Angela couldn't accept it so easily. She lowered her eyes. "I'm not that woman anymore. After the storm, I fell apart. I left nursing. I've been nothing, really. You think I'm someone I'm not." Michael reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The same hand she once held, now steady and strong. "Angela, you may feel like you lost yourself, but I see the woman who gave me life. You don't need to be perfect for me to be grateful. God used you when it mattered most." Her throat tightened. For years, she had believed she had failed her calling, failed herself, failed God. And here was this man telling her she was still his instrument. Angela blinked back tears. "Why me, Michael? Why find me after all this time?" "Because gratitude is a duty," he said softly, "and because I think you need to remember who you are. You're more than the shadows you've been living in." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the boy she had once saved, but the man God had raised from that moment. And for the first time in 15 years, a flicker of dignity sparked inside her. But she still wondered, could she accept this second chance? Could she believe that God had not abandoned her? That he had simply been waiting for this reunion to restore her purpose? The coffee grew cold between them, but neither cared. For both, the real warmth was in the presence across the table, a reminder that what we give in one desperate night can echo for a lifetime. And yet, Angela still feared what came next. Meeting him was one thing. Believing she had something left to give was another. Angela thought their meeting at Rosie's Diner would be a one-time thing, a polite reunion, a chance for Michael to thank her and for her to finally close the door on the memories that haunted her. But God had other plans. When the waitress cleared their plates and asked if they wanted dessert, Michael smiled. "I'd love to keep talking, but I don't want to overwhelm you on the first day. Could I see you again?" Angela hesitated. For years, her life had been measured by isolation. Shifts at the motel, groceries, sleep. No invitations, no meetings, no reason to dress up. Her instinct was to decline, to retreat. Yet something in Michael's eyes kept her from saying no. "I suppose," she said softly. Michael grinned. "Great. Tomorrow I'm visiting one of our partner clinics. We're delivering oxygen tanks and masks. Would you want to come with me? Just to see." Angela's heart stuttered. A clinic. The very environment she had avoided for 15 years. The smell of antiseptic, the sound of coughing, the weight of memories. It all threatened to crush her. "Michael, I don't think—" "You wouldn't have to do anything," he assured quickly. "No uniforms, no responsibilities. Just come as my guest. Watch. Meet the people whose lives your moment gave birth to. If you hate it, I'll never ask again." Angela gripped her coffee cup, her knuckles white. The thought terrified her. But also, what if it was a chance? A chance to see the purpose in her pain. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I'll come." The next day, Michael picked her up in a modest sedan. No chauffeur, no pretense. As they drove through Baton Rouge toward the small clinic on Greenwell Springs Road, Angela kept her eyes on the window. Buildings blurred past, but all she saw were flashes of 2005. The drowned streets, the bodies, the chaos. Michael spoke gently, filling the silence with stories. "We started Breathe Again Foundation 5 years ago. At first it was just me and a few friends, delivering inhalers to shelters. Now we have warehouses, distribution teams. We've helped more than 20,000 children with respiratory conditions." Angela listened, awed. She had spent 15 years shrinking her world, while this boy she once saved had expanded his into a lifeline for others. At the clinic, volunteers bustled, unloading boxes. Children and parents waited in line. Angela stayed close to the car, hesitant to enter. Michael noticed. "No pressure," he said quietly. "You can stay outside if you want, but I'd love for you to meet a few families." Angela took a shaky breath and followed him inside. The smell hit her immediately. Cleaner, antiseptic, the same notes that used to trigger her panic. She gripped the doorframe for balance. But then she saw them. Mothers cradling children with inhalers, fathers thanking volunteers, kids laughing despite their oxygen tubes. The air was heavy with need, but also with hope. Michael guided her to a small girl with curly hair and wide eyes. "This is Jasmine," he said. "She was hospitalized twice last year for asthma. Today she's getting equipment that will keep her safe at home." The girl smiled shyly. "Hi." Angela knelt slowly, her hands trembling. "Hi, sweetheart." Jasmine reached out and touched Angela's hand, the same way Michael once had. Angela's throat tightened. A flood of memory washed over her. Michael gasping in the dark, whispering, "Don't let go." Tears stung her eyes. She whispered, "God bless you, Jasmine." The girl's mother clasped Angela's other hand. "We don't know how to thank you people. This means everything." Angela wanted to say she wasn't part of it, that she was just a guest, but Michael stepped in. "You can thank her more than me. Without Angela, none of this would exist." Angela's eyes widened. "Michael, no!" But he held her gaze. "It's the truth!" The mother's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Angela, whispering blessings over her. For a moment, Angela felt something she had not felt in years. Not shame, not isolation, but belonging. When they left the clinic, Angela sat in the car in silence, staring at her hands. She could still feel Jasmine's small fingers, the warmth of the mother's embrace. Michael glanced at her. "So, how was it?" Angela exhaled shakily. "It was overwhelming, but in a good way." Michael smiled softly. "See? You still have light in you, Angela. You thought it died in 2005. It didn't. God just kept it hidden until the right time." Angela closed her eyes. For so long she had believed she was useless, a failure. But maybe, just maybe, God had been saving her for this moment, for this connection. Yet even as hope flickered, fear whispered. Could she truly step back into a world she had abandoned? Or would the ghosts of Katrina always chase her away? She turned to Michael. "I don't know if I can do this again. I'm not who I used to be." Michael's reply was steady. "That's exactly why you can. People don't need you to be who you were. They need you as you are, scars and all. That's where God's power shows." Angela looked out the window, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time in 15 years, she felt the possibility of one. Angela told herself the clinic visit would be the end, a one-time favor for Michael, a way to see the impact without getting too close. But the very next day, her phone rang. "Angela," Michael said gently, "we're organizing a big delivery to a shelter downtown. It's a little chaotic, but I think you'd love to see how families come together. No pressure, only if you're up for it." Angela hesitated. She remembered the warmth of Jasmine's tiny hand, the tears of gratitude in her mother's eyes. It had cracked something inside her. For the first time in years, she'd felt useful, necessary. "All right," she whispered. "I'll come." The shelter was bustling, filled with cots, children chasing each other, and volunteers in bright vests. Angela stayed near Michael, letting him lead. He introduced her to staff and families, but always with the same reverence. "This is Angela, the nurse who saved me during Katrina." Each time he said it, Angela's heart clenched. She wasn't sure she deserved that title anymore. Yet seeing the way people looked at her, with gratitude, respect, even awe, she felt the faint stirrings of who she once had been. But with the stirrings came shadows. As she helped hand out blankets, a generator outside sputtered and died, plunging the shelter into sudden darkness. The room filled with gasps, children crying, volunteers fumbling for flashlights. For Angela, it was no ordinary power outage. In an instant, she was back in 2005. The floodwater rising, the smell of mildew, the cries of patients in the dark. Her chest tightened. She gripped the table, her vision spinning. She could almost hear Michael's small voice again. Don't let go. Angela? Michael's hand was suddenly on her arm, grounding her. Her breath came shallow, ragged. I can't. Look at me, he said firmly. His voice was no longer the frightened boy's. It was steady, commanding. You're safe. It's not Katrina. You're here. With me. The lights flickered back on. Angela blinked, tears streaming down her cheeks. Volunteers moved past, unaware of the battle raging inside her. Michael stayed by her side. When they left the shelter, she sat in the car trembling. I can't do this, Michael. I thought I could, but every time something reminds me of that night, it all comes back. I'm broken. I'll ruin your work if I keep coming. Michael didn't argue right away. He drove in silence for a few minutes, then spoke softly. Do you think God brought you this far just to watch you collapse again? You didn't ruin anything today. You showed up, and that means more than you realize. Angela shook her head. You don't understand. I've begged God for answers for years. Why did he leave me to drown in those memories? Why let me save others only to lose myself? Michael's eyes stayed on the road, but his voice carried weight. Maybe you didn't lose yourself. Maybe you've been waiting for the right time to see what your sacrifice created. You kept me alive. And now, everything I do, every child we help, that's your legacy too. Angela stared out the window, silent. The streets blurred past, but her mind was caught between past and present. Could it be true? Had her pain not been wasted? The next week she tried to stay home, telling herself she was finished. But Michael was persistent, not in a pushy way. Always respectful, always gentle. We're visiting a school tomorrow, he'd say. Or, we're delivering equipment to a foster home. Each time Angela told him no. Each time she lay awake that night, guilt gnawing at her. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks, she called him. All right, one more time. At the school, she watched children line up for free asthma kits. A boy about 9 clutched his inhaler like treasure. His teacher leaned over to thank Michael, but he pointed to Angela. She's the reason any of this exists. The boy looked up at her with wide eyes. Thank you, ma'am. Angela's throat closed. She nodded, unable to speak. That night, alone in her apartment, she opened her Bible for the first time in years. The pages felt foreign, the words distant. But one verse caught her eye. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Her tears fell onto the page. For so long she had believed God had abandoned her. But maybe, just maybe, he had been beside her all along, waiting for her to see the bigger picture. Still, the war inside wasn't over. Every act of kindness she witnessed reminded her of hope. But every sound, every smell, every shadow could send her spiraling back to Katrina. Could she overcome it? Could she step fully into the light? Michael believed she could, but the question was, did she? It happened on a humid afternoon in late June. Angela had reluctantly agreed to join Michael at a community center where his foundation was hosting a free health fair. The place buzzed with energy. Tables of medical supplies, volunteers explaining asthma management, families moving from booth to booth. Angela stood near the back, trying to blend into the crowd. She told herself she was only there to watch, nothing more. Michael had asked her to hand out pamphlets, but even that felt like too much. The last thing she wanted was to look like a nurse again. Then it happened. A boy, maybe 8 years old, collapsed near the entrance. One moment he was tugging at his mother's hand. The next he was on the ground, his chest heaving violently, his lips turning pale. The mother screamed. Volunteers rushed over, but panic spread fast. Is anyone here a nurse? Someone shouted. Angela froze. The words slammed into her like a thunderclap. She felt her chest tighten, her vision narrow. The scene blurred into another time, another place. The flooded hospital corridors of 2005. The cries, the gasping patients, the powerless machines. Her instinct screamed, run! But another voice rose, stronger, steadier. Don't let go. Michael knelt beside the boy, fumbling with an inhaler from a supply box. His hands shook. His training was limited. He looked up, searching the crowd, until his eyes locked on Angela's. "Angela!" he pleaded. "Please!" The room fell away. Angela felt herself moving before she even decided. She dropped to her knees beside the boy, her hands steady in a way they hadn't been in years. She tilted his head, checked his airway, pressed the inhaler properly against his lips. "Breathe, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're not alone. Stay with me." The boy wheezed, his chest spasming. Angela kept her voice calm, rhythmic. "In, out. That's it. You're stronger than you know." Seconds stretched like hours. Then slowly, his breath steadied. His chest rose more evenly, color returning to his face. The mother sobbed with relief, clutching Angela's arm. Applause broke out among the crowd. Someone shouted, "She saved him!" Angela's hands trembled only after it was over. She stood shakily, the mother thanking her through tears. The boy clung to his inhaler, whispering, "Thank you." Michael's eyes glistened as he approached. "You see, you still have it. God never took it away." Angela's chest heaved. Her mind screamed she wasn't ready, that this was a fluke, that she couldn't step back into a world she had abandoned. But deep in her soul, she knew the truth. This wasn't a fluke. This was a calling she had tried to bury, and God had just unearthed it. Later, sitting on the curb outside the center, Angela wept. Michael sat beside her, silent, letting her tears fall. Finally, she spoke. "Do you know what it felt like? For the first time since Katrina, I wasn't drowning in the memory. I was present, and it worked. I helped him." Michael nodded. "Because you were made for this. Not the storm, not the trauma, this. Helping people breathe when they can't. Isn't it clear? God kept you alive all these years for moments like this." Angela wiped her eyes. "But I'm still so broken, Michael. Every sound, every smell, it all drags me back. I don't know if I can fight that forever." He looked at her, his voice low but firm. "Angela, maybe the point isn't to erase the scars. Maybe the point is to use them. The pain you carry, it makes you compassionate in ways others can't be. That's why people need you." His words cut deep, not as judgment, but as truth. Angela realized she had been waiting for her old self to return, the fearless nurse of 2005. But maybe she wasn't supposed to be that woman again. Maybe God had reshaped her into someone different. Scarred, yes, but stronger in the broken places. That night, Angela prayed with sincerity, for the first time in years. "Lord, if you still want me in this work, give me courage. Use me, even if I'm weak." For the first time, she didn't feel silence in return. She felt peace. The next day, Michael called. "We're starting a new program, training volunteers in basic respiratory care. I'd love for you to lead it." Angela froze. Leading was more than she thought she could bear. But then she remembered the boy on the floor, Jasmine at the clinic, Michael in the hospital bed years ago. She thought of the verse she had read, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." Her voice trembled, but she said, "I'll try." Michael's reply was immediate, almost relieved. "That's all I ask." And just like that, a door opened. Not to the past she had lost, but to a future she had never imagined. But Angela couldn't help but wonder, if she stepped through, would she find healing, or face new storms she wasn't ready for? Angela never thought she'd stand in front of a room again, let alone a room full of volunteers looking to her for guidance. Yet 2 weeks after the health fair crisis, there she was, clutching a folder of notes, standing in a borrowed church hall, her palms slick with sweat. Michael had set up everything, the chairs, the projector, the eager group of 20 young men and women who wanted to learn basic respiratory care. All Angela had to do was teach. But to her, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. "You'll do great," Michael whispered as he passed her on his way to the back. His confidence in her seemed unshakable. Angela cleared her throat. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice wavered. She gripped the folder tighter. I used to be a nurse." She almost choked on the words. Used to be. The shame still clung. But then she looked around the room, faces young and hopeful, some reminding her of patients she had once held, some of children she had seen at the clinic. They weren't here to judge her, they were here to learn. So she took a breath. Tonight, we're going to learn how to help someone during an asthma attack. It can mean the difference between life and death. As she demonstrated how to position a patient, how to administer an inhaler properly, she felt her old instincts take over. Her hands moved with confidence, her words steadying. She noticed the volunteers leaning forward, absorbing every detail. By the time she demonstrated chest compression techniques, she realized something. She wasn't trembling anymore. Michael clapped from the back when she finished. "That was amazing," he said, beaming. Angela blushed, shaking her head. "I just did what I know." "No," Michael corrected. "You did what you were born to do." The volunteers lined up to thank her afterward. One young woman, barely 19, said, "I never thought I could do something like this, but you made me believe I can." Angela's eyes stung. She had spent 15 years believing she had nothing left to give. And here she was, planting courage in others. Still, the war inside wasn't over. That night, back in her apartment, she sat alone on her couch, hugging a pillow. The applause had felt good, yes, but now silence pressed in. The shadows of Katrina still lurked in the corners of her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flooded hallways, heard screams, smelled the decay. She whispered into the dark, "God, why can't I be free of this? Why give me purpose if you won't take away the pain?" But no booming answer came. Only a quiet nudge in her heart. "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." The next morning, she woke with a heaviness, but also a resolve. Maybe the pain would never vanish. Maybe the scars would always ache. But could she still serve with them? Could her brokenness itself be the tool God wanted to use? Michael noticed the change in her. As weeks passed, she taught more classes. She visited more clinics. Families began to recognize her, not just as the nurse who saved Michael, but as Miss Angela, the teacher. One afternoon after a long session, Michael caught her outside the building. "Angela, I want you to consider something." She tilted her head. "What?" "I'd like you to join the foundation officially. Not just as a guest or a volunteer, but as our director of training." Angela's heart thudded. The title sounded so far above the broken woman she still felt she was. "Michael, I don't think I..." He cut in gently. "You already are. You've changed everything since you stepped in. The volunteers look up to you. Families trust you. And me? I know I couldn't have done this without you." Her throat tightened. "I don't deserve that. I'm just trying to find my footing." Michael's eyes softened. "Exactly. And in doing so, you've been carrying others. Don't you see? God's using you in ways you never imagined." Angela turned away, blinking hard. She wasn't ready to say yes. Not yet. The weight of leadership terrified her. But she couldn't deny the seed that had been planted. That evening, as she sat with her Bible open, she stumbled on another verse. "Who knows but that you have come to your position for such a time as this?" She traced the words with her finger. Could it be true? That all her years of silence, her shame, her fear, had been leading her here, to this exact season? Angela closed the Bible and whispered, "Lord, if this is your will, show me the way, because I'm still so afraid." Outside, the cicadas sang in the Louisiana dusk. Inside, a spark glowed brighter in her soul. She wasn't ready to call it victory, but she was ready to keep walking. It didn't take long for Angela's new role to be tested. 3 weeks after Michael offered her the director of training position, the foundation hosted a citywide health fair in New Orleans East. Dozens of volunteers Angela had trained gathered at the recreation center, each carrying medical kits and supplies. The air buzzed with energy. Angela walked the aisles, clipboard in hand. She still hadn't officially accepted the title, but Michael insisted she run the training teams anyway. "You're already leading," he had told her. "All that's missing is the nameplate." At first, things ran smoothly. Families lined up for free inhalers and checkups. Children laughed at balloon animals made by a volunteer in scrubs. Angela felt a quiet pride watching her trainees administer care with confidence. But then a cry pierced the noise. A teenage boy collapsed near the entrance, his body convulsing. His mother screamed, "He can't breathe! Somebody help him!" Volunteers froze, wide-eyed. Angela's heart leapt into her throat. For a split second, the old panic rose. Flooded corridors, powerless machines, the smell of mildew. Her body screamed, "Not again!" But then she saw the faces of her trainees. They were looking at her, waiting for her cue. She forced a breath. "Team 2, you're up, now." 3 volunteers rushed forward, just as she had taught them. One positioned the boy's head, another grabbed the emergency kit, while a third prepared the inhaler and oxygen mask. Angela knelt beside them, guiding their movements, but not taking over. "Steady," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Check his airway. Good. Now, deliver the inhaler. 1 puff. Count with him. In, out." The boy's chest heaved. For a terrifying moment, nothing changed. Then, slowly, his breaths steadied. His mother clutched Angela's arm, sobbing, "Thank you. Thank you." Angela looked up, not at the boy, not at the mother, but at her volunteers. They had done it. They had listened. They had carried out everything she'd taught them. The room erupted in applause, but Angela wasn't thinking about the crowd. She was thinking about the trembling hands of her trainees, hands that had steadied because she had believed in them. Later, outside, Michael found her sitting on the steps of the center, her shoulders slumped in exhaustion. He handed her a bottle of water. "You did it," he said. Angela shook her head. "They did it." Michael smiled knowingly. "Because you taught them. You trusted them. That's leadership, Angela." She took a sip, the cool water soothing her throat. "I was so close to taking over. My instincts screamed at me to do it myself, but I held back. And they were enough." Michael's voice softened. "That's the lesson, isn't it? You don't have to carry the storm alone anymore. You're not in 2005. You're not trapped in a drowning hospital. You're surrounded by people who are strong because of you." Angela looked at him, her eyes damp. "Do you really think God can use me like this? Broken, scarred, still afraid sometimes?" Michael didn't hesitate. "I don't just think it. I know it. Look around you. This entire foundation is proof. You're not just part of it. You're the heartbeat of it." Her chest tightened, but not with panic, with something new. Hope. That night, back in her apartment, Angela sat with the acceptance letter Michael had drafted for her. Director of Training, Breathe Again Foundation. She traced the words, her hands trembling. For years, she had lived nameless, faceless, invisible. And now, this, she whispered into the quiet. "Lord, I don't know why you chose me. But if this is what you want, I'll try." The next day, she signed the letter. From that moment, something shifted. Volunteers began calling her Director Angela. Parents asked for her advice directly. And though the old shadows of Katrina still whispered at night, they no longer ruled her. She was no longer just the nurse who had survived. She was the leader teaching others how to bring life from breath. But Angela knew the journey wasn't finished. Leadership wasn't just about skill. It was about courage. And courage for her meant walking into places she had avoided for 15 years. The greatest test was still ahead. Michael had an idea, one that made her stomach twist the moment he mentioned it. "We're planning an event," he told her one evening, "not here, in New Orleans, at Charity Hospital." Angela froze. The hospital. The very building where her soul had broken in 2005. Michael's eyes were gentle but firm. "It's time, Angela. Time to go back. Not as the woman who drowned there, but as the woman who survived, and who now leads others." Angela's breath caught. Could she face those halls again? Could she walk back into the place where she had lost herself and find something new waiting? She didn't answer. Not yet. But in her heart, she knew. God wasn't finished with her story. For days after Michael mentioned it, Angela couldn't sleep. The thought of walking back into Charity Hospital, the building where her hands had blistered from squeezing oxygen bags, where her ears still rang with screams, where she had lost her very sense of self, made her stomach churn. She sat at her small kitchen table, night after night, staring at her Bible. Her prayers were raw, desperate. "Lord, I can't go back there. I barely survived it once. Why would you ask me to relive it?" And yet, deep inside, she knew. Sometimes healing isn't found by running away from the wound, but by walking straight into it with God at your side. The day came. Michael drove her into New Orleans, past the familiar streets she hadn't walked in years. The city had rebuilt in many places, but some scars remained. Boarded windows, abandoned houses, ghostly shells of what once was. And then, looming ahead, the hulking frame of Charity Hospital. It stood silent, its windows dark, vines crawling up its sides. To anyone else, it was just a decaying building. To Angela, it was the tomb of her old life. She couldn't breathe. "I can't do this," she whispered. Michael parked the car and turned to her. "Angela, listen to me. You don't have to walk in alone. I'll be right there, and so will God. You face those halls in the dark, with floodwaters rising, with no one but terrified patients around you. This time, you walk in with light." Tears streamed down her face. "What if I fall apart?" "Then you fall apart," Michael said gently, "and we'll put you back together. But you won't be alone this time." Angela closed her eyes, whispered a trembling prayer, and opened the door. The air inside was heavy, musty, filled with echoes of abandonment. The floors were cracked, ceiling tiles hanging, graffiti scrawled on the walls. But beneath all that, Angela could still see it as it had been. The corridors lined with beds, the frantic shouts, the flickering flashlights. Her hands shook. She pressed them against her sides, forcing herself forward, step by step. Michael stayed close, silent, letting her set the pace. When they reached the second floor, Angela stopped cold. Her breath hitched. "This was it," she whispered. "This was where Michael lay. The boy, Michael." She saw it as if time folded, the small body on the bed gasping for air, her own voice promising, "I won't let go." She sank to her knees, sobs ripping through her chest. Michael knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Angela, look at me. I'm right here. I'm alive because you didn't let go. This isn't the place of your failure. It's the place of your miracle." Angela's tears blurred her vision. She saw him, not the boy, but the man. The living proof that God had not wasted her sacrifice. She reached out, touching the wall, the cracked paint rough under her fingers. "For years I thought this place was my grave, but maybe it's holy ground." Michael's eyes shone. "It is, because God was here, through you." For the first time since 2005, Angela felt her chest loosen. The building had no power over her anymore. The memories still hurt, but the fear was gone. In its place was something new. Peace. Fragile, but real. They walked further down the corridor, stopping at a room with broken beds. Angela whispered, "I carried patients out of here. Some made it, some didn't." She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer for the souls she couldn't save. "Lord, I leave them in your hands. I did what I could. Forgive me for blaming myself all these years." The silence felt different this time. Not heavy, not condemning, almost as though the walls themselves exhaled. When they finally stepped outside, Angela's face was streaked with tears, but her shoulders were straighter. She inhaled deeply, the humid Louisiana air filling her lungs. For the first time in 15 years, she felt she could breathe freely. Michael looked at her with quiet pride. "You did it." Angela managed a small smile. "Number God did. I just finally let him." On the drive back, Angela stared out the window, her heart strangely light. She had walked into the place that had broken her, and walked out whole. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with pen and paper. She wrote in a clear hand, "To the volunteers of Breathe Again Foundation, never doubt the power of what you do. Sometimes you'll feel unseen, forgotten, invisible, but every life you touch, every breath you protect, is a miracle. And miracles don't always make headlines. They live quietly in the hearts of those who will never forget you. Trust that God sees, even when the world does not. Angela folded the letter, her tears dropping softly onto the page, not tears of despair, but of release. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Lord, for not letting go of me, even when I let go of myself." And for the first time since Katrina, Angela fell asleep without fear. After the visit to Charity Hospital, something shifted inside Angela. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they no longer crushed her. She woke from them with tears, yes, but also with a whisper in her heart. "You're free now. The past is no longer your prison." She stepped fully into her new role at the foundation. The volunteers began calling her Director Angela, not as a formality, but with affection and respect. She taught weekly classes, sometimes twice a week when demand overflowed. She didn't just train volunteers, she mentored them. She told them stories, not just of medical technique, but of compassion, of what it meant to hold someone's hand when fear threatened to swallow them. Word spread. Local news outlets began covering the foundation's work. When they asked Michael for interviews, he often redirected the spotlight. "You should talk to Angela," he said. "She's the reason this foundation exists." Angela was stunned the first time a reporter shoved a microphone toward her. Her instinct was to shrink, to disappear. But she remembered the boy at the health fair, Jasmine at the clinic, Michael gasping in the hospital bed. She remembered the night she returned to Charity and walked out whole. And she spoke. Her words weren't polished. She stumbled, she paused. But she was genuine. "I used to believe my scars made me useless," she told the reporter. "But now I see they are the reason I can help others. God doesn't waste anything, not even pain, especially not pain." The clip went viral locally. People flooded the foundation's page with comments. "Her story made me cry. I thought I was too broken to matter. Now I want to volunteer." God bless Angela. For Angela, it was overwhelming. For years, she had lived invisible, hiding from the world. Now strangers wrote letters thanking her, some even calling her a hero. She still didn't feel like one, but she was learning to see herself through God's eyes instead of her shame. Michael, too, grew closer. They spent long evenings planning programs, sometimes sharing meals afterward. He was young enough to be her son, and in many ways, he treated her as a second mother. He often reminded her, "You kept me alive, Angela. Everything I am, I owe to that night." One evening, after a long day of deliveries, they sat in the office surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered papers. Michael leaned back in his chair, exhaustion on his face. "You know what's crazy?" he said. "I used to think Katrina was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But now I see it was the night God tied our lives together. He gave me a second chance through you, and maybe he gave you one through me." Angela's throat tightened. She looked at him, this man who had once been a frightened boy in her arms, and felt something she hadn't in decades. Family. Not by blood, but by the threads of fate God had woven through storm and sorrow. "Michael," she said softly, "you gave me back my life. You think you owe me, but it's the other way around. You reminded me who I am." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "Maybe we just gave each other back to God." Angela wiped her eyes, laughing through tears. For the first time, her heart felt light. Months passed, and the foundation grew. Angela oversaw hundreds of volunteers, expanding training programs into multiple cities. She traveled with Michael to conferences, speaking about resilience, trauma, and faith. Each time her message was the same. Even when the world forgets you, God does not. Even when you think you've lost yourself, He is already weaving your return. But it wasn't only the world she spoke to. She spoke to herself every time. On the one-year anniversary of her official role, the foundation held a ceremony to honor its leaders. Volunteers gathered, children whose lives had been saved came with their families, and local officials offered thanks. Michael stood at the podium, but instead of talking about himself, he called Angela forward. The applause was thunderous. Angela walked to the front, trembling. She wasn't used to applause. She had been forgotten for so long, her name unspoken. Now dozens of voices lifted her name in gratitude. Michael handed her a plaque. "Angela, for the hands that held on. She touched it, tears streaming. She turned to the crowd. "I thought I had been forgotten," she said. "I thought God had turned his face from me." But he hadn't. He was just waiting for the right moment to show me that my story wasn't finished. If you feel broken tonight, if you feel useless, please remember, God still has a plan. He always has a plan. The room erupted again. People wept, clapped, shouted, "Amen." Angela stepped down from the podium with shaking knees, her heart soaring. For the first time since 2005, she wasn't only surviving, she was living, truly living. And as she hugged Michael, she whispered in his ear, "I didn't let go. Not then, not now." In the quiet months that followed the ceremony, Angela often sat by her window at night, watching the streetlights glow across Baton Rouge. She thought about how far she had come, from the floodwaters of Katrina, to the dark years of silence, to the trembling steps back into the world. Sometimes she still felt the weight of her scars. The memories hadn't vanished, but they no longer defined her. They had become instead the soil where new life had grown. One evening, she sat across from Michael at the foundation office after a long day of meetings. Volunteers had filtered out, leaving the two of them in the dim light of a single desk lamp. "You know," Angela said, sipping her tea, "for years, I thought my story ended in that hospital. I thought God had used me up and thrown me aside." Michael looked at her gently. "And now?" Angela smiled softly. "Now I see he was just waiting. Waiting for the right moment to bring me back. Waiting to show me that the pain wasn't wasted. That the night I thought broke me was actually the night he planted a seed." Michael leaned back, his voice warm. "And look at what grew. Thousands of kids breathing easier because of you. Volunteers who believe they can make a difference because of you. Even me, I wouldn't be here without you." Angela shook her head. "Without God," she corrected. "It was never me alone." Silence settled between them, but it was the kind of silence that carried peace, not pain. Weeks later, Angela visited Charity Hospital one last time. This time, not in fear, but in gratitude. She stood in the empty hall, sunlight streaming through broken windows, and whispered, "Thank you for every life saved, for every tear shed, for every breath carried. I leave the rest to you." Then she walked out, her steps steady. The building no longer owned her. Her life belonged to God. As the years went on, Angela became known not just as a nurse, not just as Michael's savior, but as a teacher, a mentor, and a living reminder that redemption is possible. Her story was told in churches, schools, even on national news. But Angela never sought fame. When people asked her what her secret was, she always said the same words: "Don't let go. Not of faith, not of hope, not of God. Even when the storm rages and the world forgets you, hold on, because he never lets go of you." And those who heard her believed it, because she had lived it. Angela's story reminds us of something we often forget, that sometimes the bravest people are not the ones who make headlines, but the ones who keep promises in the dark. She saved countless lives during Katrina, yet lived years believing she was forgotten. And isn't that true for many of us? We give, we sacrifice, and we wonder if anyone notices. But God notices. He does not waste pain, and he does not forget faithfulness. Angela thought she was broken beyond repair. Instead, her scars became the very proof of God's power, that he can take what is shattered and use it to build something greater than we ever imagined. So I ask you, listening by the fire tonight, what storms in your life have left scars you try to hide? Could it be that God is saving those very scars to help someone else breathe again one day? And when redemption comes late, do we recognize it? Or do we push it away out of shame? Angela's story is proof that no storm has the final word. God does. Thank you for joining us tonight, dear friends, for another live story by the Fireside. Angela's journey teaches us that sacrifice is never forgotten, that redemption can come even after decades of silence, and that God never lets go. Not of a child in a storm, not of a broken nurse, not of you. If the story touched your heart, share it to the ones you love. And if you would like to listen to more like it, you know where to find us. Good night, and may your scars remind you not of what you lost, but of the miracles God is still writing in your life.